When we are born, if we're lucky, our parents will attempt to control our environments. If they're successful, we'll have a much skewed picture of reality for a long time. We'll be surrounded by happy faces and attitudes that are optimistic and confident about the future. The people we come in contact with will be carefully chosen, and we'll have examples that lead us to believe that other people are trustworthy and have our best interests at heart. Good parents want these to be our default values on life and on society. But the best of parents cannot shield us from the rest of reality forever. We will learn that this life ends, that happiness can be fleeting, and that there are people who would do us harm. If we have an opportunity to become well-educated, we begin to see that the history of human society has been fraught with the struggles of honest, decent people against those who take advantage of them. For every people, every race, every place where people gathered, there was war and slavery and murder and plunder for thousands and thousands of years. But then we learned that one society was to be based on a different set of ideas. The United States was to be about freedom. In this place, the government would exist to ensure freedom of speech, freedom of association, and above all, to secure the blessings of liberty. But that's a strange phrase to be so central to the Constitution. The blessings of liberty. Clearly, that's a statement of philosophy. It asserts that good things happen when people are free. Not everyone believes in that idea, obviously. There are those who think that good things happen when people are not free. They want to control other people, in fact. If others have profits, for example, they want to take those profits and do what they assert are better things with that money, things that those who earned it would not have done. So, who believes that freedom creates blessings then? Americans believe in that idea because that's our founding idea. It's those who are un-American who reject that idea. With respect to the U.S. Constitution, the phrase, "the blessings of liberty," refers primarily to free markets. Free markets are simply what happens when people are free, and free markets are what produce the blessings that liberty produces. Americans love the idea of free markets, but those who hate America hate this idea. But why do Americans think that free markets bring about blessings? This is rooted in the idea that when people are free to enter into business or employment agreements with other people on terms that each finds acceptable, unhindered by external interference, that a particular set of outcomes eventually occurs. Number one, prices become reasonable, considering the estimated cost to produce goods or services traded for them. And number two, the quality of the products and services improves. Prices become reasonable and quality increases because vendors are penalized by the legal system for using force or coercion in order to transact a trade. The only strategy for success, therefore, is to market the value of what they have to trade. In addition, they have competition from other vendors who may also hope to make this trade. If you make a birdhouse, for example, and it takes you 8 hours and costs you $50 to make it, you may choose to sell for $1,000. Some in your customer base may have plenty of money and choose to buy at that price, and you've made a great profit. Others in the market may think to themselves, I would like that birdhouse, but I think I can make one myself for $50, so I will not choose to buy. Another person may note you are selling birdhouses for $1,000 and may see an opportunity to make a good profit by making and selling them for only $500. Still others will undercut the price until the profit potential becomes too low for the effort involved. At that point, the market has produced birdhouses at a price that equals the cost of materials and labor, plus a reasonable profit. Now the competition between vendors becomes more focused on making a better birdhouse than the competitors, or providing better service around the transaction. This is why people believe that free markets perform better than the alternative. Clearly, millions of people who call themselves Americans don't express a positive attitude toward free market principles. This is strange to real Americans because we recognize that a free market is just an environment where honest, decent people can engage in trade with one another with some expectation of having our rights protected. In this environment, honest people are rewarded and evil people are penalized. It's nothing special or complicated. It's just the way freedom works. The left in America express the belief that there is a better way. They contend that there is some societal benefit from having the government control a market. This obviously means to change society from a free market to something other than a free market. If a free market just means that everyone can trade as they please, with government penalties for fraud or coercion, then what characteristics would a different type of market have? The government can only change its role from preventing fraud and coercion in the free interchange among citizens by doing something else, which would either be to stop this prevention or to even participate in fraud or coercion on behalf of those citizens who would like to commit fraud or coercion in their transactions with their fellow citizens. For example, citizens may express concern for people who can't afford a birdhouse at the free market rate of reasonable. They may lobby the government to punish evil birdhouse builders who won't sell their birdhouses for 10% of what it costs to build a birdhouse. The government then decrees that birdhouses shall be priced no more than $5, and then they pay security personnel to enforce this decree. All existing birdhouses are then priced at $5 and sold to eager consumers. A strange thing happens soon after, however. Suddenly, there are no more birdhouses available in the market. Turns out no one wants to expend the effort and expense required to build the birdhouse if they're going to lose money on each one they construct. But now citizens who have seen that others have received $5 birdhouses are upset and claim themselves entitled to $5 birdhouses. And then they march on City Hall to express their displeasure with the lack of $5 birdhouses. What might the government do in response? They may create a government program to hire people to build birdhouses to sell for $5, using tax revenue to pay for labor and materials. Suddenly, there's a great demand for birdhouse materials and labor, and there's no end to the demand in sight. Material and labor costs necessarily skyrocket because there is no downward pressure on consumer desire or need to assess whether the effort required to create the birdhouse makes the price a good value, because there is no longer a relationship between the price and the cost. There is also no need to be concerned about the quality of product or service surrounding the transaction, because there is no competition for the government program. Now, $5 birdhouses are everywhere, but as happens with supply and demand often, people stop being interested in $5 birdhouses. Everyone who wants one now has one, and there are more birdhouses than can be sold. In a free market, people would stop making birdhouses at this point because there would be no financial incentive to do so once the market disappears. In a government bureaucracy, however, people start to see incentives that honest people don't consider. What if, for example, the factory could just continue to make the birdhouses and throw them into a hole in the desert so they can continue to renew their government contract to build birdhouses? To sweeten the deal, maybe the factory owner contributes to the campaign of someone who can help to ensure that the contract is not discontinued. We then have personnel hired to make sure that everyone is paying their birdhouse taxes, which continue to increase every year. There is every incentive among those who collect taxes and receive tax grants to keep the money flowing, and for many, this incentive overrides any sense of honesty or responsibility they would have had no choice but to observe in a free market. For Americans who believe in free markets, it is this unnatural set of incentives and the force and coercion that accompany all breaches of free market principles that characterizes leftist ideology. For us, a free market rewards good, decent human beings, and a leftist society rewards people who are willing to lie, to cheat, steal, and commit violence against their fellow man. But Democrats who call themselves Americans don't appear to address any of these criticisms. Instead of making arguments, they will make accusations that divide us. They will say that capitalism is based on greed, something that Hitler was fond of saying in the speeches you're not allowed to see. But what is more greedy than desiring something for which you do not intend to trade on mutual terms? They will say that capitalism favors the rich, but a capitalist society is the only society in which the poor can become rich. They will say that capitalism favors the white race, but who is more racist than those who believe non-white races have nothing to offer in a meritocracy? They will say that all of society's evils result from the whites, or the blacks, or the Jews, or the cops, or those who cherish freedom, but it is never the fault of the left. They will say anything and everything to draw attention away from the fundamental reality of what it means to be a Democrat. It simply means that you are willing to take by force. You may not be willing to take by force as an individual, but you are willing to vote to have it done by your representatives on your behalf. Democrats imply through their actions, their words, and primarily through the words they avoid, that some forms of taking by force are acceptable, while others are not. They may express the value that a man raping a woman under threat of murder is not acceptable, but that taxing all homeowners yearly to fund government education is an acceptable program. Even many who would call themselves Republicans would see a distinction between those two acts. But is there really a fundamental difference, or have you just been conditioned to not question it? If the rapist threatens his victim with murder, if she does not stop resisting, she then has a choice. If she stops resisting, does the rape then become consensual sex? And what about a homeowner who may see public funding of education as anti-free market and anti-constitution? He may have a moral or even a religious opposition to the practice of government funding of education. What do the representatives of these programs say in response? What will happen to you if you refuse to pay these taxes? A Democrat might say that the worst that could happen would be a fine. But is that really the penalty? That is only the penalty if the homeowner consents to pay those taxes. If the homeowner resists, as with the rape victim, the actual penalty is beyond the rape. If the homeowner refuses to pay, the police will eventually attempt to force the penalty and will increase that force as long as the homeowner is increasing his resistance until ultimately the property owner will be killed by those who vote in favor of public funding of education through their representatives. Therefore, death is the actual penalty for not supporting the Democrat idea of public education. So what the Democrat voter actually says with each socialist program is that we don't care if you don't like it, and we will kill you if you resist us. The only difference between the rapist and the Democrat state in this comparison, in fact, is that the rapist could be bluffing. We all know that the Democrat state is not bluffing. Democrats take by force, period. Every single act they take is a violent, evil act. They label it democracy, which in their view sanitizes it. That word is supposed to carry some noble connotation, but it isn't noble. Gang rape is a perfect example of democracy. But taking by force through democracy is not only evil, it is also childish. Democrats view government in the same way that small children view their parents. The government is, in their worldview, the entity that has the money and the authority to decide who gets it, while they view other human beings as their siblings in this family of society. Adults, on the other hand, Know that the government just represents an agreement between equals in society to set ground rules between us so that we can attempt to live in peace with one another. Adults know that there is no one above us on this earth, and no valid authority to tell us what to do or to take what they want from us against our will. As such, we have the natural right to defend ourselves against such people. Under our Constitution, in fact, we can only be forced to contribute what's necessary to secure our liberty, and the government is limited to actions that fulfill that role. If the government is doing something that can't be justified in the service of securing our liberty, then it's doing something that is unconstitutional. That behavior is what makes something unconstitutional. The government's only true role in the United States is partial defense and partial infrastructure, and that's it. But Democrats don't see it that way. Democrats don't like the responsibility that accompanies adulthood. They want an authority to cry to about what they perceive to be injustices in the world. While true Americans see injustice in crimes such as theft, murder, or fraud, Democrats have a different view of what injustice may mean. To a Democrat, it is unjust if people don't get a free education paid for by government. To a Democrat, it is unjust if citizens don't get free health care paid for by government. To a Democrat, it is unjust if some people own houses and other people don't. They assert that their fellow citizens who disagree are evildoers, bent on stopping them from having what they want. They, as children, parrot slogans that they've not analyzed. For example, before Obamacare, how many times did you hear someone say, "We're the only developed country in the world without free health care. We're the only developed country in the world without free health care. We're the only developed country in the world without free health care. We're the only kids on our block without designer shoes. We're the only kids in our class who aren't going to the concert. We're the only kids who don't get the allowance we deserve." And now, we have Obamacare. But what is it, and how have things changed? Before we can answer that, we need to look at what a free market healthcare system looks like. In a free market healthcare system, there are people who need or want healthcare products and services, and there are people who work to supply them. In addition, there are insurance companies that develop policies to contribute to that marketplace. In a true free market, all of these players make agreements on terms that they all find acceptable. All of the free market forces come into play, and, as Americans deduce, the prices for products and services become reasonable, and the quality is improved over time. Just prior to Obamacare, the status of the American medical market could not be described as a fully free market because it was already heavily regulated. It will, however, serve as a valid comparison to what came after. During the time leading up to the first Obama election, I would spend occasional evenings in sports bars with attractive young bartenders. When the bartenders weren't bragging about their monthly excursions to Cancun or the Bahamas or Las Vegas or Aruba, they would complain about the fact that their job did not supply health insurance and were stoked about the possibility that Obama could fix all of that. It just so happened at this time that I was becoming a contractor and would have to purchase my own health insurance outside of employer plans for the first time. As a man well into his 40s at that time, I was concerned about how much it would cost. With very little effort, I found a policy, including dental, for $110 per month, with a yearly deductible of only $2,500 and a max yearly out-of-pocket of $5,000, all with no medical examination required. Again, this was already in a climate with overregulation and for a middle-aged man. With that in mind, what would the price of a similar policy have been for a 20-something bartender? $50, $60 per month? So if these bartenders had simply cut out one lavish vacation per year, they would have been able to buy very good health insurance policies straight from the market. As others have pointed out, this price is comparable to a cell phone bill. How many people in society that would complain about the price of a health insurance policy refrain from purchasing a cell phone policy? Practically zero is the answer. So, if any American has an opportunity to purchase a healthcare insurance policy for about the same price as a cell phone bill, and even less in a real free market, then who is it that a program like Obamacare is designed to help? What kind of people, primarily, would not pay to insure themselves and the children they have brought into the world, but would demand free healthcare instead from society? The answer is obvious. We're talking about irresponsible, selfish, stupid, and/or evil people. These are children who demand products and services from their fellow Americans, but refuse to pay a reasonable price for them because it would discomfort them. Likewise, the rapist wants sex, but not if it means doing what is required to obtain it consensually. But what effect does Obamacare have on society? Obamacare's existence means that the government declines its role of penalizing fraud and coercion and begins implementing fraud and coercion on behalf of Democrat voters. For example, it's fraudulent for the government to call what's left a marketplace, but that's how they title their website. And it's fraudulent to call the products that responsible people are coerced into buying insurance. In a marketplace, people are free to create and purchase products of their own accord, on terms of their choosing. In a marketplace, insurance policies are products created by free people who use their skills to analyze real-world cost and produce products that help people in trade for reasonable profits considering the risks they take. As with all socialist programs, however, there is no longer choice, competition, or any relationship between the cost and the price of what people are forced to buy. This is all implemented through a website that famously cost billions upon billions of dollars to produce. What we now have as citizens is an electronic genie who tells each of us, through our computer screen, based on criteria that are hidden from us, what we must pay in order to be allowed to see a doctor. For the middle-aged people who have worked long hours all of their lives and saved responsibly with intentions of retiring early and starting a business, or otherwise investing their savings in a creative endeavor, they now learn that Democrats have a better idea in store for those profits. We now find, as Americans who believe in and are dedicated to free markets, that we will be forced to unload our savings by the tens of thousands every year into the new healthcare system just to get in line behind all of the people that we are being forced to pay for. Single welfare mothers who give birth to crime stats every year no longer have to worry about healthcare costs, or housing costs, or food costs, or whatever else they may desire, because someone else is being forced to worry for them. They have been, we are told, empowered. This is what Obamacare really is when you strip away all of the propaganda. It's just stealing, by force, what decent, good, honest people have earned and giving it to dishonest, lazy, selfish, evil people. But it's worse than that. Socialism is always the 1-2 punch, because it's never just the transfer of wealth from those who deserve to live in society to those who don't, but it's also the unnatural incentive structure that ensures that prices necessarily skyrocket and that quality necessarily declines until the entire enterprise collapses in a violent pile of its own evil and stupidity. Let's compare. What is the price to take an Uber to your nearest emergency room? Maybe $10? How much does it cost to take an ambulance instead? Well, nobody knows, but we know the price is thousands and thousands of dollars, and that the cost is nowhere near the price. Who is getting all of that extra money between the actual cost and the bill that's sent to the taxpayer? We'll never know, but what we do know is that it isn't honest people. Democrats love confusion and chaos because it creates a smokescreen behind which they can hide. But this isn't complicated. It's very simple. Those who embrace free market capitalism are good, honest people who want to live together in peace. Those who reject free market capitalism want to use force and fraud to get what they want from other people instead of voluntary exchange. The Constitution of the United States does not describe a two-party system. Every person elected to public office must take an oath to uphold the Constitution. That's why they are there. Therefore, the United States of America is a one-party state, the Constitution Party. Under our way of life, we require free markets and accept no alternatives because we deduce that alternatives necessarily require coercion and fraud, and we regard that behavior as evil. All Democrat programs take by force, and therefore all Democrats are evil. They intend to confuse and to diffuse blame for all of the pain that they cause. They want us to incorrectly organize the world around us in response to their lies. They work to categorize human beings in ways that cause us conflict. They want us to distrust one another based on race, or gender, or ethnicity, or perceived wealth. But the enemies of humankind cannot be discerned by appearance. The groups that comprise both the good and the evil are extremely diverse in all of the superficial ways. The groups look very much the same. We can only be known by the beliefs we put into action. If you believe in voluntary interchange between people within free markets with defense against fraud and coercion, then you are one type of human being. If you think that government force can be justified beyond that defense, to confiscate resources in a discriminatory way towards some purported societal benefit, then you are the other type of human being. These two philosophies are not compatible, and there is ample data, beyond what's obvious to decent human beings, that illustrates which is superior for the well-being of human beings in society and for society itself. These belief systems are the blueprint or the DNA out of which society develops. If the incentive structure that guides the growth of a society rewards honesty, ingenuity, a good work ethic, and efficiently meeting the needs of citizens, the society will be beautiful, strong, vibrant, and peaceful. If that incentive structure instead rewards deception, fraud, coercion, and laziness, society will decay into ugliness, fear, and violence. Now that we've reached this point, which are you?